All right, Jess, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back.
Right on. Well, here today we're going to talk a little bit more about the housing market and really want to talk a little bit about home ownership, especially in our generation.
Yes.
We are both what they would call millennials.
Yes,
and,
we are both millennials.
With very, very talked about generation. And although we're kind of getting out of the spotlight now, I think we're getting old, and Gen Z is getting in there pretty big. But the fascinating thing I wanted to start off today on was we found recently that the average age of a homeowner is 33 years old.
Right.
Which is astonishingly higher.
I feel like, okay, and I'm not calling people that are 33 old, but I feel like that's really like a long time to wait to buy your first home.
Yeah, and certainly if you look at the historical data, it's up there. You
right.
know, I think our parents were buying a lot of their homes in the 20s.
My dad still hasn't bought a first home.
Wow. yeah. We got to get out there and sell them something.
I know,
then,
I'm
right?
trying.
But yeah, it's pretty fascinating, and there's a lot of factors into it. A lot of people blame economy and a lot of different things. But we're here in Colorado, and our market's a little different than everywhere else. But how do you think that translates here? Do you think that we have, you think a lot of people are waiting to buy houses here? Do you think we have an issue with that?
I think people are waiting longer than they really have to. I think a lot of why people wait in general is just out of fear, especially with the millennial generation. We grew up knowing the recession. We felt that. We knew what that was like. And I think a lot of millennials are very afraid to put themselves in that same position where people lost their homes. Like, that's a big deal. So I think it's feared that people don't realize that, one, our economy is not like what it was, and the loans that are out there are not like the loans that were out there in 2008, 2006, and everything that were loans that people were going to lose their houses with. Certainly. Also, I think, people just don't realize that home ownership is beneficial. I know you and Joseph talked about it in another podcast, is as beneficial as it is to you, and that it is as attainable as it is to most people.
It's a good point. Yeah, I think one of the things we, as realtors, I think you can confer with this, that see all the time is that there's a lot of people, especially people our age, that can't afford a lot of stuff, and they don't buy a house. They get a really big car.
Right.
They have all the different monthly subscriptions you could ever want, and get the newest iPhone every year. But they don't, for some reason, don't want to go qualify for a house. And for what
crazy.
I found is everyone that does sees that, oh my gosh, I can pay less rent and own something, or less than my rent and own something. And it's really fascinating that we that age has gone up, and that people still are living with their parents and doing stuff like that.
One thing that I think is really crazy too, that I talked to my friends about this, and any of my friends that I've tried to get to buy a house, if you're listening, you're gonna roll your eyes, but so many of them are paying someone else's mortgage, and they're already okay with having roommates. So my point to them is, why not you be the landlord? You own the house that you're living in, and have other people pay your mortgage that is eventually going to amount to all this wealth for you.
This is
you're
such an
at an age
interesting
you're
thing.
totally fine with, living with roommates. You don't have a family. You don't have kids. Like, that you don't want to have this like huge house by yourself, which I think is what a lot of people think of with owning a home. They think of their parents' homes, but start smaller. So when you're at your parents' age, you can own what your parents have.
Exactly.
Or more.
Yeah, it's such an interesting point you bring up, the potential out there. When and this is something for a whole nother podcast, but investments. The something that my family and I would want to build our wealth through is investment in real estate. And so it's such a simple concept. You buy a house, you get a mortgage typically, unless you have that much cash. And
I don't know many millennials that have $250,000 cash.
I don't know anyone with that
if
kind
you
of cash.
do,
Even
let
people
me
that
know
seem to
how
have
you
money
did
don't have
that.
that kind of cash.
Yeah.
But you can still buy a house and have a mortgage, and it, depending on where it is, you need to make a good decision. This is where you can talk to us. This is where we can help. But you can, and certainly in northern Colorado, there's so many areas like this where the rent is high enough that you can have a mortgage. Your rent is higher.
Yep.
And you can have something that's sitting there earning you money all the while appreciating. And
appreciating, or you're just paying down that equity. So it's money. So say, you know, your mortgage would be $1,500, or your rent is going to be $1,500.
yeah.
Paying a mortgage, you're paying that towards something that you can eventually get back. Paying rent, you're paying someone else's mortgage that they're going to get back, not yourself.
Yeah, it's incredible how much you end up spending when you rent for a long time versus how much you end up save and you earn for yourself. So of course, everyone's different. Every situation is different for where you might be. And I think maybe a lot of people listening to this might say, well, I mean, gosh, and this is true for a lot of people, that their wages aren't high enough to afford a home, or they literally can't find a job. They have, student debt is a huge problem.
Yeah.
So there's so many other factors that go into this. And the other highlight I think that we see is, even in a lot of these situations where people are not very well qualified, I see a lot of people that still will co-sign, even at these, ages in their 30s and stuff, will co-sign with their parents.
Right.
And there's just so many options out there when you just ask for the help.
Absolutely.
And if you're out there living in the basement with your folks, and if I think it's so worth it to ask the question, what if we bought something together and I live there and I get a few roommates to help pay the rent? I mean, gosh, I know so many people living in Denver now, at least I should say so many, but a handful of people that have bought houses, and they live in the master bedroom. They have the bedroom and all that, and they have 2 roommates.
Yep.
And they don't pay a mortgage. They don't pay anything.
Yeah.
Basically,
because someone else is paying their mortgage for them.
Yeah. So 2 people paying rent on bedrooms pays for the entire mortgage of a 3-bedroom house. And it certainly doesn't work everywhere.
No.
But I love talking to people about this concept and getting them into it. One of the other things I've seen recently is people utilizing Airbnb. That is a really...
It's been a huge help for people paying mortgages.
Yeah.
I love it.
Right? I mean, I'm sure some people at Hub have, some of the owners have Airbnbs. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah. Aaron has one for sure. Aaron's the only one I know for sure that has one. But
I know Philip has one too, but the
yeah, he does. He's a really successful one on Mountain.
Yeah, they all seem to have them, and I have 2 clients now this year that have done the Airbnb strategy, and one in particular, I'm so blown away at the financials of it, because I'm used to kind of targeting this stuff based on a yearly rent.
Right.
And I know a friend who, she bought a house, and she basically keeps everything in her room and rents the entire rest of the house out as a Airbnb, and pretty much rents it about pretty much a week out of every month. And she makes more money than she would renting it out.
You can make
12
so much money.
It's insane, and it's a really nice house, so she can charge so everything's different, but that is a huge, I almost want to call it a loophole, because it seems like such a big thing, like a big popular thing to do that may eventually have more regulations around it.
Cities are definitely starting to tighten down. In Fort Collins, for instance, you have to have a certain permit, you have to be within certain zones. But even in this, there's zones that if it's your primary residence, so if that's the place that you're calling home, that's the place that you're laying your head down at night most nights, there are some ways around even Fort Collins' super strict Airbnb policies, but it's definitely something that, is possible, and you can find properties that qualify for these Airbnb.
Yeah, and that's the crucial part. You need to, if you're going to do that, you have to make sure that it's okay, that there's no rules against doing an Airbnb in your neighborhood or wherever that is. You have to make sure that it's legal, and but if you can find an area that you can do that and make it work, I think right now is a good time that it's very profitable. Oh,
it's super profitable. Speaking back to my parents living in Malibu, there's a lot of Airbnbs in Malibu right now, and it is something that that town is trying to crack down on, but it's an insane business, and I think Airbnbs are more comfortable. Don't you? Like when you're traveling?
I love Airbnbs.
Yeah.
They're amazing.
They're great. I can bring my dog. I'm sleeping in the right bed.
Yeah. Last year I stayed in New York for $100 a night. Nice little Airbnb. It was great. It was incredible.
Yeah, and that's like $100 towards someone's mortgage.
And people want to come stay in Colorado.
In one night. If you have a $1,200 mortgage, like that's 12 days.
Yep. Either way, you know, this all is just coming back to there's so many options with home ownership, and it's not always black and white, but you know, come talk to us. We'll see what you can do.
There's a million ways to make real estate work for you.
Exactly. Well, I think we're out of time today, Jess, but thank you again for coming on. We'll talk again soon.
I like it. Bye.